What if Hollywood's most famous sea wasn't water at all? A director collapses in the desert, returns with a megaphone, and a baby borrowed from the star's crib steals a scene. This is the Ten Commandments. Bigger than its temples, stranger than its miracles. We'll rip through 20 rapid revelations, a budget that rattled studios, a heart scare that paused the shoot, practical wizardry that held back waves, and a camera format that later helped launch Star Wars. No sermons, no fluff, just the ingenious chaos behind a classic you thought you knew. Ready to part the myths? Let's dive in now. Fact 1. The budget that rewired Hollywood, $13 million in the mid-50s, wasn't a budget. It was a dare. DeMille didn't just build sets, he built a civilization, then framed it in razor-sharp VistaVision so every column, jewel, and grain of sand felt mythic. The number terrified accountants, rattled studios, and forced Paramount to think like an airline, not a movie house. Roadshow engagements, reserved seats, souvenir programs. Crews carved cities out of timber and paint, wrangled armies of extras, and stitched costumes by the thousands. Money bought scale, but it also bought time. Endless retakes, bigger tanks, more elaborate effects, until the film looked larger than the theater containing it. The price tag wasn't excess, it was strategy, turning spectacle into an event people dressed up for. And when the checks cleared, the industry had a new playbook. Spend boldly, brand the experience, and let awe do the marketing. That shockwave, you'll feel it in the numbers next. Fact 2. Money, myth, and a yearly ritual. Audiences lined up for months, and when the curtains finally opened, it felt less like a screening and more like a civic ceremony. Box offices treated tickets like passports. Families planned weekends around reserved seats and souvenir programs. Paramount kept bringing it back. Road shows, reissues, restorations, until the movie wasn't just a hit, it was a habit. Then television turned tradition into ritual. Each spring, network airings stitched the film into holidays. Living rooms filling with popcorn, grandparents quoting lines, kids discovering Moses for the first time. The numbers were jaw-dropping, but the custom became the real story. A 3-hour epic morphed into a calendar marker, like fireworks in July or pumpkins in October. People tuned in for spectacle, stayed for comfort, and returned because myths feel new when they arrive on time. But there's a price for endurance. Schedules slip, budgets strain, and bodies hit limits. Behind the glow, production bled. Fact 3. The collapse at Per Ramesses Desert Heat can humble anyone. For Cecil B. DeMille, it nearly ended the film. After climbing a towering set ladder to check a camera angle, he felt a crushing tightness and collapsed. The diagnosis? A serious cardiac episode. Production froze, insurance men circled, paramedics warned him to stop. 2 days later, he came back anyway, paler, slower, but unshakable, directing from a chair with his megaphone while assistants handled climbs and stunts. The entire crew rallied. Extras hushed when he lifted a hand. Departments shaved minutes off setups. Even the studio eased off when dailies kept looking majestic. The scare changed the rhythm of the shoot. Shorter bursts, more prep, fewer retakes unless they mattered. It also branded the movie with a stubborn heartbeat you can feel in every frame. If the general refuses to retreat, the army keeps marching. And march they did, straight toward the sea that would have to split. Fact 4. How to part a sea. Without computers, buckets, tanks, physics. That's how they split the Red Sea. Effects chief John P. Fulton staged 2 giant dump tanks and filmed water blasting out, then reversed the footage so the walls appear to rise and hold. Slow motion thickened every motion. Miniatures sold the scale. Matte paintings stretched the horizon. For tactile texture, the crew brushed gelatin-thickened mixes across glass to make the water tremble like a living wall before it broke. Air pumps added ripples. Backlights made spray glitter. Composite passes stitched everything together. No pixels, just patience and nerve. The final collapse? The same shot played forward, synced to thunder and score. It still fools modern eyes because it obeys gravity. Our brains buy the physics, so the miracle lands. And that wasn't the only sleight of hand in the film's toolbox. Next up, the tiniest performer, straight from the star's home, and why his close-ups hit harder than you remember. Fact 5. Baby Moses was a Heston. Baby Moses wasn't cast. He was family. The infant drifting down the Nile is Fraser Heston, Charlton Heston's real son, just a few months old during filming. That's why those close-ups feel disarmingly intimate. The baby recognizes the man holding him. It also solved headaches. Newborns bring insurance red tape, rigid hours, and tears you can't direct. Using the star's child streamlined permissions lessons and kept the set calmer. One correction many miss: the on-screen mother, Yoka Bell, was played by Martha Scott, not Charlton's wife, Lydia Clark. The real parents waited just off camera while history rolled. Fraser didn't stay in the basket either. He grew up to write and direct, working with his dad on TV, movies, and features. So the myth's opening image is literally a family picture. Father guiding a son who would one day guide stories of his own. But the next revelation isn't about faces, it's about a voice. Fact 6. The voice from the bush. Whose voice speaks from the flames? Depends on who you ask. Many crew memories say Charlton Heston recorded the lines for the burning bush. Then engineers slowed and deepened his track, so Moses, in a sense, hears himself answered. Other accounts insist DeMille layered voices to sound beyond human, and that publicist Donald Hayne handled certain commandments proclamations. Either way, the trick wasn't mysticism, it was acoustics. Record dry, vary speed, add chamber reverb, and fold in low-frequency weight until the syllables feel ancient. The result isn't thunder so much as presence. Close, intimate, unblinking. It also fits the story. The same performer who pleads, "Let my people go," also brings the reply, making the conversation feel inevitable, fated. That ambiguity fueled decades of debate and goosebumps. And while the voice was disputed, the next figure wasn't. An actor nearly sidelined by politics who clawed his way back on this set. Fact 7. The comeback in a tunic. Edward G. Robinson almost vanished from top billing in the early 50s. Politics chilled phones, prestige parts dried up. Then DeMille handed him Dathan, the slick fixer who cozies up to power and sells out his own. Robinson devoured it. He traded the gangster snarl for a serpent's smile, turning every line into a threat. The casting was bold. A legendary tough guy, bruised by headlines, asked to embody compromise itself. It worked. Reviews singled out his magnetism. Audiences couldn't look away. Watching him knead Pharaoh while despising him gives the film its bite. Survival versus loyalty. Comfort versus courage. The role reopened doors, leading to work and a reputation reset. Call it a comeback written in sand and gold leaf. And when the exodus surges across the screen, remember the man sneering at its edge helped resurrect his career. A reminder that epics change more than box offices. They change trajectories. Fact 8. Crowds. You can feel heat, dust, and human momentum. You can feel it. Those exodus shots weren't a digital stampede. They were bodies on open ground. DeMille filled the frame with caravans, wagons, livestock, and waves of extras moving in rhythm. Wranglers kept animals steady, while assistant directors signaled formations like battlefield captains. The camera stays low and wide, so the crowd breathes. Fabric snaps in the wind. Wheels bite into sand. Kids glance up for cues and then remember to keep walking. That texture sells deliverance more than any speech. You sense distance passed, water rationed, ankles rubbed raw. Logistically, it's insane. Costumes tracked by the rack, meal lines timed like rail schedules, resets that mean turning a river of people around without spilling the illusion. But that's the power of real scale. Your eyes stop questioning and start absorbing. When the mass finally crests the ridge, you feel the lift. Next, those tablets' secret. Fact 9. The tablets weren't stone. Those tablets looked like granite, but they weren't. DeMille's prop crew built multiple sets, hero, stunt, and wide-shot versions, out of fiberglass and resin, so Charlton Heston could lift them take after take. Surfaces were cast with faux chisel marks, then aged with pumice, dust, and shoe polish to catch light like quarried rock. Edges were rounded to survive drops, glyphs were hand-painted and sealed so sweat wouldn't smear. For close-ups, a heavier hero pair added believable strain. For climbs, a lighter set saved his shoulders. Sound finished the trick, a deep, woody thud layered in post whenever stone met stone. Watch Heston's body language, the staggered stance, the breath before the lift, the careful set down, and you'll swear they weigh 50 pounds. That's performance and prop design, doing perfect teamwork. Several screen-use pairs later surfaced in archives and auctions, proof the stone was clever chemistry. Next, fire that burns without consuming, the bush's quiet illusion. Fact 10. The bush that burned and didn't fire, that refuses to eat its host, looks simple on screen, but it took stubborn craft. Effects techs built a metal bush shaped to hide small gas jets. Flame licked just above heat-proof leaves so nothing charred. Cameras ran slower than real time. Then prints were optically layered to give the glow a floating halo, as if the light had thoughts of its own. Sound pulled you closer, a dry crackle under a low, steady breath. More presence than bonfire. The shot works because it never screams, it whispers. hovers and waits. Your eye scans for a trick, wires, smoke machines, a tell, but finds a plant that shouldn't survive and does. DeMille wanted wonder that felt handmade yet uncanny, the border where physics behaves and faith begins. It's a quiet miracle tucked between louder spectacles, and it still steals the scene. But the next sign wasn't quiet. Watch the river change now. Fact 11. Turning the Nile. Turning a river crimson looks brutal on screen, but the trick was elegant. Effects crews preloaded pitchers and basins with dye packs sealed under thin membranes. When actors poured, pressure burst the seals, and the clear water bloomed red in close-up. In wider shots, tinted stock tanks and dye injectors colored surface currents first, then drifted outward, so the change felt organic. Lighting did the rest. Cooler fill made normal water look flat. A warmer key snapped the scarlet to life. Optical printing sweetened transitions, stacking passes so the change felt continuous when cuts stitched shots together. Sound added unease. Liquid thickening, crowds murmuring. They rarely showed the Nile shift at once. Montage and reaction shots let your brain finish the miracle. Practical chemistry, camera patience, editorial nerve. That's how a prophecy becomes a picture. And while the river ran red, awards voters were taking notes. The next twist lands in gold. Fact 12. Oscar night curveball, 7 nominations. 1 statue. That's the paradox of the 10 Commandments at the Academy Awards. It stormed into the 1957 ceremony, up for Best Picture, Color Cinematography, Art Direction, Costume Design, Film Editing, and Sound. Plus the category it ultimately won, Visual Effects. The showstopper Red Sea sequence carried the night, but the crown went elsewhere. Best Picture, Around the World in 80 Days. Industry mood was drifting towards sleek spectacle and globe-trotting novelty, and voters followed the breeze. DeMille's Biblical Thunder felt old school to some, even as audiences kept packing theaters. The split between box office devotion and awards taste became part of the film's legend. The people anointed it, the Academy tipped its hat and moved on. Irony lingers. Its lone Oscar honors the craftsmanship that made belief visible, which is exactly why the movie endures. Awards close curtains, rituals reopen them every spring, and before the story even begins, DeMille steps out. Fact 13. The proto-YouTube intro. Before the curtains part, a man steps out and talks straight to you. It's DeMille, not hiding behind credits, asking for your attention like showman and preacher in one. He frames the story, pledges respect to sources, and sets the stakes so the next 3 hours feel necessary, not optional. In 1956, that was unusual. Today, it reads like a creator's cold, open, promise value, earn trust, then deliver. The speech also solves a problem. A biblical epic can feel distant. A human host warms the room, gives permission to wonder, and invites skeptics to lean in. He argues for myth and morality without scolding, then steps aside while the world he built swallows the screen. Call it an early retention tactic. Message delivered, curiosity primed, drop-off delayed. Even the cadence has thumbnail clarity. Why it matters, what you'll see, what you'll feel. Next up, the movie's second life, polished to a modern shine. Fact 14. The 4K resurrection. VistaVision was built for big negatives, and the 2021 4K remaster finally lets you see what that meant. A fresh, high-resolution scan pulls detail out of every bead, braid, and sandstone groove. Digital cleanup scrubs scratches without ironing away the grain that makes it feel alive. Color timing corrects decades of faded prints. Desert light turns honey bright, lapis blues deepen, gold reads as metal instead of paint. HDR widens the glow around torches and the sheen on armor, so textures pop without looking plastic. Optical shots, the composites and mattes, are steadied rather than sanded down, preserving the handiwork that sold the miracles. Even the mix feels refreshed, giving score swells and crowd murmur a little more air. It's less a facelift than a restoration of intent, the epic you remember, only sharper, steadier, truer to its showman scale. And the revival didn't stop at the screen. Promotion for this film was literally carved in stone. Fact 15. PR. You could trip over the campaign didn't end at trailers. It spilled into town squares. Paramount partnered with civic groups to place granite 10 Commandments monuments across the country. Public art as perpetual ad, sermon, and selfie spot long before selfies. The slabs outlived roadshows and reissues. They became wayfinding. Courthouse on the left, tablets on the lawn. The studio also leaned into community push-pull, church screenings, bulletin inserts, study guides, even souvenir programs that turned moviegoing into an event. event. It was marketing with Afterlife, a film that followed you home, onto mantles, and into memory. Decades later, those stones still spark curiosity, nostalgia, and the occasional debate about where myth belongs in public space. That's PR you don't scroll past, you walk around it. The strategy was simple. Make the movie feel like civic heritage, then let tradition do the rest. And while those monuments weathered the seasons, another artifact slept under sand, an entire buried city from a film past. Fact 16. The Buried Epic. Before the 1956 Colossus, DeMille had already raised an Egyptian city in the California dunes for his 1923 version. Columns, gates, sphinxes, an entire city of Pharaoh, sculpted from timber and plaster at Guadalupe Nipomo. When filming wrapped, he faced a problem. Miles of set in the middle of nowhere. Rather than let imitators rent it for pennies, he ordered it pushed under the sand. Bulldozers complied. The desert swallowed Hollywood. For decades, locals told stories of buried sphinxes. In the 1980s, archaeologists and film historians began to dig. Out came broken faces, painted fragments, and monumental ribs of plaster, ghost architecture from the silent era. Pieces now sit in nearby exhibits, proof that spectacle can fossilize. The tale loops back to 1956. Having once built a city and buried it, DeMille returned to the story, determined to outdo his younger self. If sets can hide for generations, imagine how deep the research had to go. Fact 17. Paging Philo and Josephus. Before cameras rolled, DeMille built a library. Research chief Henry S. Nerdlinger assembled a thick dossier, later published as Moses in Egypt, pulling from ancient historians like Philo and Josephus, museum catalogs, and contemporary Egyptology. The goal wasn't museum-perfect accuracy, it was convincing texture. Wardrobe notes tied dyes and fabrics to class and court rank. Prop lists flagged symbols that should appear on amulets, staffs, and wall friezes. Even letter forms mattered. How a royal cartouche curves, how a Hebrew inscription might read to period eyes. Departments passed memos instead of guesswork, so details echo. The cut of a collar repeats in a statue. A motif carved on a chariot wheel returns on a palace door. The scholarship doesn't freeze the film. It fuels it, letting grand gestures sit on a lattice of specifics your eye believes even if you can't name them. And the tools capturing those specifics, they'd spark a later revolution in outer space. Fact 18. From Moses to Star Wars, VistaVision didn't just make deserts look mythic, it solved generation loss. By running 35mm film sideways across 8 perforations, it captured a larger negative with finer grain. In 1956, that meant sharper costumes and columns. 2 decades later, it became Industrial Light and Magic's secret weapon. Building motion control rigs and optical printers for 1977's Star Wars, ILM revived VistaVision bodies to photograph miniatures, starfields, and blue screen passes with room for multiple dupes. The Big Neg tolerated compositing, matte lines, and dirt better. When reduced to 35mm, the image looked cleaner than shooting small. The Dixtraflex system's choreography, repeatable camera moves on models, clicked because VistaVision held detail take after take. Call it the Moses to Star Wars pipeline. A format forged for biblical spectacle became the backbone of space opera. Technology travels, myths migrate, and tools outlive trends. And while cameras leapt to the future, the film itself kept returning every spring on television. Fact 19. A holiday habit that refuses to fade. Once a road show, now a rite. Every spring, network TV dusts off the 10 Commandments and turns living rooms into miniature theaters. It's appointment viewing in a streaming era. Families plan snacks, text reminders go out, and someone inevitably quotes along before the overture would have started. The runtime becomes part of the comfort. Commercial breaks double as refill intermissions, giving the epic a breath it once had in grand palaces. Airings tend to orbit Easter and Passover, so the story keeps meeting audiences at the exact moment they're already thinking about origins, ritual, and release. New viewers stumble in during channel flips. Veterans arrive like pilgrims, ready for the sea to hold one more time. The broadcast isn't just nostalgia, it's renewal, a yearly proof that analog spectacle still gathers people in the same hour. That's retention you can't algorithm, and all that tradition points to one last answer: why it still lands. Fact 20. Why it still hits epics age when they feel distant. This one stays close. The miracles are handmade: water from tanks, fire from pipes, stone from resin. So your eye reads craft before it reads myth. That makes belief feel possible. The stakes are human: jealousy, loyalty, pride, a family torn in 2 courts. You don't need a sermon to track it, you feel it in faith faces, and heat. VistaVision gives it physical presence. Crowds move air, fabric whispers, sand shines. The scale isn't abstract, it's weight you can touch. Then tradition seals the bond. Because it returns every spring, the film becomes a memory you revisit with different eyes. Child, parent, grandparent. Imperfections help too. Matte lines, performances, showman's prologue. All signal a hand reaching toward you. Movies are machines for empathy. This one keeps the gears truly visible. That's why it lands. It's not just about deliverance, it's about people delivering it together. From a director who refused to quit to oceans held up by physics, the Ten Commandments endures because its wonders are human-made. Budgets ballooned, hearts faltered, crowds marched, and a family's infant floated into legend. VistaVision bridged eras, from desert epics to starships, while annual broadcasts turned spectacle into ritual. The film's contradictions are its power, intimate and colossal, handmade and mythical, dated yet alive. It reminds us that faith in stories often begins with faith in craftsmen. Next time the sea rises on your screen, look for fingerprints in the foam and ask what impossible thing you're willing to build with people.